Welcome back. This is AP U.S. History. This is Chapter 3, Part 4. Now, looking at the New England area, we're going to focus on the religion and the politics in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Um, if you were not part of the church, you were not allowed to vote. Um, Here shows the population growth of the colonies, um, and you can see that very few blacks. The native population was on the decline, but the whites certainly increased. This shows another view of the population growth compared with the Chesapeake area and the New England area. Certainly, the New England area had an edge. Well, non-religious men were not allowed to vote. They did have town hall meetings, and this will be the beginning of democracy in North American British colonies, and this is where much of our heritage is traced back to. Far more democratic in New England colonies, even if you were not allowed to vote if you weren't part of the church. They believed government was to enforce God's laws, and they believed that non-believers and non-Puritans should not be part of the government. They forced everyone to support a mandatory tax, and you were to cease from any kind of activities, even if you didn't attend their church on Sundays. The clergy were not allowed to hold public office, so this was the beginning of the separation of church and state. There were some religious dissenters, particularly Quakers, were persecuted by the Puritans. Anne Hutchinson, well-known person driven out of the colony. She was primarily driven out because she claimed she could have direct revelations from God, and she seemed to be kind of challenging the local pastor. Later, she will die at the hands of Native Americans. Roger Williams is going to be banished for several reasons. He challenged the authority of the NBC charter. He said that there were some things that they weren't allowed to do. This shows a picture of both Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams. He believed that the land belonged to the Indians and the king had no right to take that away from them without compensation. He believed that civil government had no right to regulate religious behavior. He believed that was up to the church. And you couldn't force people to go to church. And if there was some kind of problem within the church, it should handle it, not civil authorities. He also believed that there should be a wall of separation between church and state, that the church and the state should be separate entities, that although he believed that the church should influence the state had no business trying to regulate the church. Decline of the Puritans. Later generations aren't as quite as full of the spirit as the Puritans, or they don't have the same zeal. Um, People have various beliefs. The church kind of loses its grip on the people coming in. They come up with what they call the halfway covenant. That is, if your parents were believers, you could be a member of the church. So there was the distinction between the elect and the non-elect sort of is blurred. And of course, that's going to cause some problems because not everybody's going to have the same attitude of what should be done in the church. A blight on American history, the North American area, is the Salem witch trials. Kind of symbolized the decline of the church. There was a paranoia that the witchcraft and the devil were in the woods and that it should be eradicated. Some children were playing and they claimed to have conjured up something, and bad things started happening in the community, and as a result of it, people were accused of witchcraft. The local clergy supported it, and it sort of got out of hand, and a lot of the people were killed, essentially innocent people, because of this paranoia. Eventually, this is going to go away and never to return. Primarily, the people who were accused of witchcraft were usually single women those who couldn't defend themselves against the authorities. Uh, a lot of it was based on trying to acquire somebody else's property or livestock or possessions, so it had something to do with greed. The establishment of Rhode Island in 1644 was done by Roger Williams, and this is where the Baptist Church is going to originate in Providence, Rhode Island. Promoted religious freedom. You could believe what you wanted. You didn't have to go to church. It was probably the most liberal area in the colony in terms of religious freedom, and that probably in Pennsylvania. No one took an oath, no compulsory church attendance, no taxes to support the church unless you wanted to, simple male suffrage, so you didn't have to be part of the church to vote. So this is going to be pretty democratic. And of course, the other New England colonies saw Rhode Island as pretty much the cesspool of that area. They didn't go along with that. Connecticut is going to be founded in 1636 by Reverend Thomas Hooker. He believes he wants to start a new colony, and he does. And this is south of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He believed some of the things going on in the MBC was a little arbitrary and oppressive, and he wants to settle a new area. He comes up with the first draft of the Fundamental of Orders. It is the first written constitution that will be used later by the Founding Fathers. It established democratic control, consent of the people, established three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. New Hampshire is going to be the next one, founded in 1679, primarily a fishing and trading economy. Charles II wasn't too happy with NBC, so he just arbitrarily separated it and made it into New Hampshire. Later, New Hampshire will become a royal colony. New Haven is founded in 1636, founded by Puritans wanting a stricter and closer church-government alliance. The colony will later be absolved by the Connecticut colony. New England colonies as they existed in 1650. The Pequot War, they had some harsh problems or difficult problems with the local natives. The Pequot War primarily was motivated in Connecticut. 90 men went to a small village and slaughtered everyone there, primarily to take the land from the Indians. It was pretty brutal. The rest that weren't killed were sold into slavery. Of course, the Puritans used the Bible to justify their actions. So this is the first war. It didn't last too long. Pequot village totally destroyed. King Philip's War, this is a far more serious war. It's the last Indian war in New England. King Philip's of Metacon doesn't like the way the Puritans are treating him and his tribe and the way they're taking the land. They attack 90 Puritan towns and burn and loot 52 of them. Things seem to be turning against the Puritans. It looks like the Indians are going to get the upper hand, but eventually Metacom is he's killed and his head is cut off and is put on a pike for 20 years as a reminder that to any other Indian who might think about attacking the settlement. The New England Confederacy is put together, and it's going to be a way to protect the colonies. Here's a picture of King Philip's fighting the whites. Anyway, this confederacy was primarily as a protection against the Indians in the area and the French. So this was the first time that the colonies, with the exception of Rhode Island, band together for mutual protection. Dominion of New England is established in 1686, and this was done by Charles II, and so he wants to have one large colony controlled by the crown. So he doesn't like all the freedom that these New England colonies are experiencing, so he wants to put the clamp down. He revokes the charter, believes the colonies exist for the benefit of the mother country, something called mercantilism that we'll talk about later. So this Dominion of New England is created. Sir Edmund Andros is appointed governor of this huge colony and places huge and more restrictive regulations on the colony. The navigation laws are enforced. That is, you couldn't buy things from the Dutch in any other country. You had to buy exclusively from England. Town hall meetings were forbidden, and heavy restrictions on courts, press, and schools to make sure that they were following the king's edicts. He's not very popular, and he taxed without consent. Smuggling was suppressed. But unfortunately for him, the Glorious Revolution triggers, or it comes back, and the king is going to be rousted. And some might say this uprising that took place in the New England colonies was the first American Revolution. Um, Eventually, King is taken out, and Andros is arrested and sent back to England, and the dominion of New England is essentially over. Massachusetts Bay Colony never did surrender their charter, and but there will be tighter administrative controls over the British colony will be the result. In terms of Puritan contributions to America, certainly the church values that they promoted, the work ethic, church meetings, town hall meetings. They were interested in land improvements, bridges, schools. They'll be the first to establish public schools. So we owe them a great deal in terms of what they contributed to the American character. Primarily the schools were to make sure that people were able to read the Bible. They created some colleges, and they had a sense of community, a responsibility, and they argued against slavery. Here's some of the motto from the church. Things that the Founding Fathers shaped the New England area, well, political, religious freedoms are going to develop in New England. Although there was persecution of Puritans and Pilgrims, that resulted in the migration to the New World. The English Civil War forced colonies to defend themselves. How did this play in the role in the development of the New England colonies? Well, it's going to be not quite as strict as back home. The Pilgrims come for religious freedoms. Puritans want to reform the church. Rhode Island is founded by dissenters, and Connecticut, consent of the people, one of the things in their fundamental order of Connecticut. Puritans separated the clergy and the civil leadership, separation of church and state. Puritans believed that they were the brother's keeper, promoted social responsibility, provided education. Well, the economy, we'll look at, there was a different, more diverse economy in the New England area as opposed to the southern colonies, and a little bit more socially tight-knit colonies. Socially, education, strong sense of community. Of course, economically, it was more diverse. Politically, the church members had some say in what went on. And we'll stop right there.